Thank you for visiting my Photoshop for Teens lessons on Teachers Pay Teachers. Question I wanted to answer in this video is, how are these lessons developed or designed? Are they related to each other? Sometimes I'm asked, can I just do these randomly? Do I have to follow the sequence? The first thing I wanted to stress is that I didn't have any materials when I started teaching Adobe Photoshop, so I started creating my own materials. And what I noticed is that things like the Adobe Classroom in a Book series, they had a lot of different content that was shoved into a lesson, and I didn't really see a sequence or a progression. So when I design these lessons, I always think, what is it that I want them to learn, and how will this help for the next lesson? And then when I'm on the next lesson, what do they need to review from the previous lesson? So let's take the first lesson here called Simple Collage. In the Simple Collage, all they're doing is they're learning how to open and close Photoshop. They are copying and pasting an image from the internet into Photoshop. So as you may know, you can't just right click and paste into Photoshop. You have to actually use the function buttons or Control V. So that gets stressed in that lesson. And then how to change the background color using the paint bucket. Every lesson has 3 to 7 new things they have to learn. Now, once they're done with the Simple Collage and then go to the next lesson, which is Practice with Layers, well, they're still using what they learned in the first lesson, which is copying and pasting pictures from the internet, how to change the background color, how to use the magic eraser. But now they're also learning new things about the layers and how the layers work with each other, how they overlap, how you can move them around, using the move tool. So the lesson stresses using the layers. So now they go to lesson number 3, edible insects. Well, in edible insects, it's just a practice of lesson 1 and 2. They are copying and pasting information from the internet. They are editing a file that you give them that's already been started. So they have to practice, how do they remove a layer? How do they move a layer up and down the panel, and how do you move things around the screen that you want in different places or something on top of another. As you can see, all 3 lessons are related, and if you follow that sequence, it's a good sequence. And it's going to be the same thing with every single lesson you follow. So if I go down the screen here and then I go to Collage of warped photos, well, most of the skills that they need to complete that lesson have already been reviewed in the previous 14 lessons, but then it gives something a little bit different in terms of, well, now you can skew. So then it has them practice, how do they skew their layers? How do they add a stroke? And how does it look different adding a stroke here instead of just adding a stroke to a picture that's just a square or a circle? If you look at the sequence is thought out. Now, there are people that don't follow this as a complete curriculum, so maybe that's not as important. But if you are starting from scratch and you have to decide, should I use these lessons as a sequence or a book or some other curriculum you might have, I would suggest, just because I've used these lessons for well over 10 years, that this is a pretty good sequence to follow. And if you see anything that's really off, I always say just email me and we can take a look at it. But I can tell you that I have had people ask me, can you add a step here? Or this step isn't clear. Can you add in an additional screenshot? And I'll do that gladly. The lessons are pretty much how I taught them. And there are some lessons in a few places where they're just a review. So, for example, the hardware flyer, that's just a review of the previous 4 lessons. Now, another thing I didn't want to do is I didn't want to give 5 lessons back to back on text effects and then 5 lessons back to back on picture effects. I wanted them to be kind of intermixed. So, for example, you do have the zombie text effect as lesson 13. And then if you notice, there's some other lessons there. And then finally you get to the glitter sparkle, which is another text effect. So it's not until the Great Pumpkin Challenge that they actually have to draw something. Maybe for the realistic tears, you know, they had to draw a little tear and that was it. But in the Great Pumpkin Challenge is when they have to draw the mouth, the eyes, the nose. So that gets a little bit more involved for them than just trying to draw one tear. Another thing is, if you notice, for layer styles, they use the layer styles not only for text, but they also use them for images, and they also use them when they drew their own pumpkin face. So I tried to make sure that they were using the different Photoshop features, but not only for one thing, not only for one style. And that's something that I think is different from a lot of other curriculum I've seen. So I can tell you that I use these lessons, and I would speak to teachers, and then I would have them use these lessons also. And I've sold these lessons thousands of times on Teachers Pay Teachers. So they've been tested, and you have people from different states using them, people in different levels. So I've had teachers tell me they used it for middle school students and they worked well. I myself did not use these lessons for middle school students. I taught 9 through 12 with them, and then I taught adult education classes, so they would use these lessons. And I even had a teacher tell me she used it with 5th and 6th graders, and she was able to do it successfully. Thank you for your consideration of using my lessons for your classroom. I really do hope that they allow you some extra time. They cut down on your planning, they cut down on your printing, and you're able to teach more successfully with these. Thank you.